What is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos. I am your host, Justin Bales, and we have a smaller three-game slate tonight. Still enough to break down, but this podcast should actually be relatively short because there just aren't that many plays to go over. As always, if you enjoy our content, go ahead, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. You can turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos that we post. It should be sent to you as soon as they are posted. You can also comment any questions or comments you have, and I will answer them throughout the day. So if there's someone that you're wondering about that I did not discuss on this video, go ahead, drop them in the comments, and I will let you know what I think about them. Like I said, only a three-game slate, just not that much going on. We do have quite a bit of injury news, I guess, that we kind of need to wait on a little bit at the moment. There's some big names. Number one, Willie Cauley-Stein has already been ruled out, while Luka Doncic and Tim Hardaway Jr. are both questionable. Those are the two big ones that we kind of have to worry about. Devin Vassell was out last night, but they haven't ruled him out yet tonight, so he'll probably be questionable, or at least this time he's questionable. And then in the Boston-Los Angeles game, Jaylen Brown is questionable and Carmelo Anthony questionable on the other side. So quite a bit going on that we just kind of need to wait for and see more or less what happens. It looks like LeBron James, should be fine to play. Obviously, you have some guys that have missed a bit of time that I'm not going to go over that will continue to miss quite a bit of time. Also in that game, Anthony Davis is currently probable to play as well. So just realistically, the bigger news that we're waiting on would be Luka Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., Jaylen Brown, and then I guess you can really throw Carmelo Anthony in there as well. But with the big three healthy for the Lakers, you're probably not using Carmelo Anthony anyway, and you likely won't be using whoever would benefit from him being out as well. But we'll go position by position, kind of discuss a little bit of everything that we like, who to play, at what price tags, all that good stuff. Starting at point guard, I think it's pretty clear cut for me. If Luka Doncic is playing, he's my top option. If he's out, obviously I'm going to need to make some type of change. I probably drop down personally, but I do think that Luka is the best play. He comes with triple-double upside. He gets the solid matchup against the Brooklyn Nets, who I'm not really worried about, and that game could quickly turn into a shootout. So obviously, if you're picking one side of Dallas, or I guess one player for Dallas to turn this into a real shootout, it's probably going to be Luka over Porzingis. So he would be my top option. I don't really have too many issues with some of the other guys. I guess if Luka is out, I probably drop down to DeJounte Murray, who I feel is a bit underpriced for how well he's playing. I do think that he's a very viable option even with Luka in. He's just been playing extremely well. I have no issues whatsoever with him. If Jaylen Brown is out, Dennis Schroeder at 6,400 becomes a very good play. If Jaylen Brown is in, I probably look elsewhere. Specifically, probably drop down a little bit to Derek White, or I do believe you also can go above him to Alec Burks, who has been starting at point guard for the New York Knicks. Once again, depending on Luka being in or out. If he's out, Jalen Brunson at 5,200 is too cheap. If he's in, I probably shift my focus a little bit to Derrick Rose or Emmanuel Quickley. Of the two, I slightly prefer Rose just because I believe that he has more upside than Quickley, just the type of roles that they're playing. I believe that Rose, while on the court in the bigger minutes, he's the type of guy that is willing to take over a game where it doesn't seem like Quickley is quite there yet. And then if you want to go all the way down, Cameron Thomas is playing relatively decent minutes. They're pretty inconsistent, but he has flashed at times. Only 3 games, you might have to get weird somewhere. And Cam Thomas is a kid that can score very well. And obviously, I expect him to continue to get better as the season progresses, which generally is the case for young players. But at only 3,300 on this type of a slate, I do think that he's at least viable. Moving to shooting guard, outside of Jaylen Brown, who obviously is questionable, we don't have anyone above 6,200. It's actually pretty crazy. If Tim Hardaway Jr. is also out, Jalen Brunson gets the bump there. There's not a lot going on here that I actually like. I think you can use the guys that I mentioned at point guard. Outside of that, I think you're probably dropping down a bit. Someone like Malik Monk, I don't have too many issues with, but as long as you have Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis all on the court, a guy like Malik Monk probably goes a bit overlooked. So I do think he's viable. He's been playing extremely well. I think he has 30 plus in 5 of his last 6, and he's still only 4,400. But in a bunch of those games, Los Angeles was dealing with more injuries. So he'll kind of take a little bit of a hit in this type of a game, but I do think that he's at least viable. The same can be said for someone like DeAndre Bembry. I kind of struggle a little bit with him because, for so long, he really wasn't doing all that much well on the court. Now, all of a sudden, he's playing significantly better, which, you kind of have to acknowledge. But at what point in time does Bembry go back to being the player that he was, where he just doesn't do anything on the court? And we've seen it multiple times before. Like a few games ago against Minnesota, he scored less than 15 fantasy points in 27 minutes. Outside of that, though, he's been scoring 20 plus. He's flashed 35 fantasy point upside. That's just as long as his shot's falling and he's being a little bit more aggressive, which obviously if his shot isn't falling, he's not the type of player that's just going to shoot it out. He'll kind of take on other roles in the offense. And you're not really getting too big of a discount with him at 4,300. So I'm a little iffy on him, but I do think that he's at least viable. If Jaylen Brown is out, I think Josh Richardson at 3,500 is fine as well. And then you have someone like Lonnie Walker, who obviously can score fantasy points in a hurry. He comes with quite a bit of upside for only 3,400, especially if Devin Vassell is out tonight. I do believe that Lonnie Walker will probably get a little popular. At small forward, once again, the top option for me is Luka Doncic. I think that Kevin Durant is completely fine on the other side of that game. I would expect those two to kind of go back and forth. LeBron James continues to play really well, and he's under 10,000, so I don't have any issues with him. This is actually a really good position compared to some of the other ones. Jason Tatum is the other high-priced option, and I don't have any problems if you want to use him. I think that he'll gain some value if Jaylen Brown is out as well. So anyone priced at Jason Tatum or above, I do believe is in play. I think if I had to rank the 4 of them, I probably personally rank them Luka, Tatum, LeBron James, Kevin Durant. That's probably the way that I would go about it. Then obviously Alec Burks, we already talked about, and then you're getting down to around the 5K range, where you have someone like RJ Barrett, who just oddly is taking on a significantly lesser role in the offense. He's been really inconsistent. It's really tough to trust someone like that, just the way that the Knicks are playing and everything. So he's not really a guy that I'm overly looking at using. But at 4,700, you do have Evan Fournier, who's playing big minutes in his last 2 games. Similar to Barrett, he does come with quite a bit of risk. So it's not really someone that I'm looking for, or I'm looking to use in cash games. But I do think that he's at least viable in tournaments on this slate. You have Doug McDermott at 4K. He's been a solid scorer basically throughout his entire career. He can add rebounds. He can add a few assists as well on any given slate. But he more or less is a scorer for San Antonio. At 4,000 on this type of a slate, it's at least a solid play. You really won't find too many players that give you that much upside. I think that I prefer Lonnie Walker to McDermott, but I do believe that both are very solid plays. And I think that Walker probably loses a bit more value than McDermott if Devin Vassell is able to suit up tonight. Moving to power forward, you kind of have a few guys that we've already talked about. Anthony Davis near the top here. I feel like he's a viable option. I just would prefer for a very similar price tag LeBron James. So as long as you don't necessarily have to put them into power forward, because LeBron now is point guard, small forward eligible, I would prefer LeBron to Anthony Davis. I probably won't be using Julius Randle personally. I do think that he's at least viable. I think that he's fine. It's just that there's a bunch of other plays that I like more. I would just much prefer Jason Tatum for 300 more, and it's not going to be very difficult to find that on this type of slate. If Luka Doncic is out, I will personally lock in Kristaps Porzingis. I have essentially done that the entire season. People kind of like to talk about how he's not really all that good, but when Luka's not on the court, Porzingis is a very good player, and he's back under 8,000 because Luka obviously is healthy. So I do think that he's a very good option, specifically if Luka's out. If Doncic's playing, I think that Porzingis is viable. We've kind of seen him go off with Luka on the floor as well. I think that he just carries a ton more risk than if the offense essentially is running around him. So viable, but super risky. I guess the better thing, I guess, would be the way to say it about that type of a situation would be that Porzingis probably loses quite a bit of ownership. He'll be chalky if Luka is ruled out, especially since it's the first game on the slate. So it's not like we're going to have lock and then figure it out. We're going to know well before lock. As you move down a bit, you have guys like Keldon Johnson who come with plenty of scoring potential. The matchup against the Knicks isn't necessarily elite, but I feel like it's at least relatively fine. I don't necessarily know if I want to go lower than him at this point. With Porzingis essentially back in the lineup, I believe he's probable tonight. Maxi Kleber, Dorian Finney-Smith, they're going to lose quite a bit of their value, and they're now priced up a little bit. Blake Griffin just not seeing the consistent minutes, I guess, that we necessarily want. And there's not really too many other guys that can pop off in the limited minutes for their price tags. I guess if you want someone like Paul Millsap, he's kind of proven that he can do it, but not really someone that I'm looking to invest in on this type of a slate. I would much rather just spend down at a different position, spend up on my power forward, and kind of move on. At center, I do really like Jakob Poeltl. He's coming off of a good game last night. He's performed extremely well. He's been absurdly consistent, and DraftKings refuses to price him higher than like 6,200. I think it was back in essentially October. They had him around 7,000. Since then, he's dropped to right around 6,000 on basically a nightly basis, averaging almost 40 fantasy points. I believe he's slightly over 35 fantasy points per game at home this season. Obviously gets the matchup at home. New York struggles against centers. So I do think that Jakob Poeltl is a really good option. I want to say that I like Robert Williams, especially for the price tag. The big problem is you really can't trust him at this point. He's a little bit cheaper than LaMarcus Aldridge, who obviously gets the great matchup against the Dallas Mavericks. I prefer Aldridge. I do think that Williams is a fine tournament option. It's just you really can't trust him between coming back from injury, not getting the consistent minutes, and then going back and forth with fouls, kind of throughout the season. So I just prefer Aldridge for similar price tags. And then if you're dropping down lower, I would say that Dwight Howard is probably the guy that sticks out. They were using DeAndre Jordan, and then it took way too long for them to realize that DeAndre Jordan isn't the answer. So they started using Dwight Howard a bit more. As long as Howard's getting the minutes, he can still produce in terms of fantasy. Not necessarily a great real life player at this point, but he does have double-double potential. He can add blocks. He can add steals. So I do think that Howard is a pretty viable option against Boston on this slate. But that about does it. That's quite a few plays at each position, especially for only a 3-game slate. But if there's anyone that you have any questions on, drop them in the comments. I will try to answer them throughout the day. Again, if you enjoyed the content, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. You can find all of our core plays along with our projections, our premium content you get in our premium Discord. All of that can be found at dfskarma.com. If you add /pricing, that is exactly where our core plays package will be found. You can also go to dfskarma.com and you can just click on the pricing tab and you can find it there. But that is what I have for you guys tonight. I believe I will be back most likely with Spike on the podcast with me tomorrow because we have a significantly larger slate. Then I believe we're back to another 3-game Thursday slate because the NBA is doing this whole weird shuffle where they're having these massive days and then days with literally nothing. But until then, good luck tonight, and hopefully everybody wins.